The first time I met my husband's father, I felt an uneasiness I couldn't quite explain. He was polite, charming even, but there was something in the way he looked at me, something that made my skin crawl. I tried to brush it off, telling myself I was overthinking, that it was just nerves from meeting my in-laws for the first time. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to admit it. At first, everything seemed normal. My husband, Daniel, had always spoken highly of his father, Richard. He was respected, well-spoken, the kind of man who commanded a room with just his presence. I wanted to believe Daniel, to see what he saw, a caring father, a strong family figure. And for a while, I played along, pushing aside the little things that made me uncomfortable, the lingering glances, the way he stood just a little too close when we talked, the offhand comments that felt a little too personal. It wasn't until the night of our anniversary dinner that everything changed. Daniel had planned a beautiful evening, a candlelit table at our favorite restaurant, a quiet celebration of our love. But an unexpected work emergency forced him to step away, leaving me alone at the table. And that's when Richard appeared. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, sliding into the seat across from me before I could even respond. His smile was warm, but there was something behind it, something that made my stomach tighten. I told myself it was just a harmless conversation, small talk between family. But as the evening went on, his words became more pointed, his tone more familiar. He leaned in closer, his fingers grazing mine as he reached for his drink. "You know, you're truly a remarkable woman," he murmured, his eyes holding mine in a way that made my breath hitch. "Daniel is lucky. So very lucky." I forced a laugh, shifting in my seat, suddenly desperate for Daniel to return. The restaurant felt smaller, the air heavier. I could feel Richard watching me, studying my every move. And then he said something that sent a chill down my spine. "You ever wonder what life would have been like if we had met first?" I froze. The clatter of silverware and distant chatter of other diners faded into the background. My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to process his words. This wasn't just playful banter. This was something else, something dangerous. Before I could respond, Daniel returned to the table, his presence breaking the tension like a snapped thread. I forced a smile, pretending everything was fine, but inside I was shaken. That night, as we drove home, I kept replaying Richard's words in my mind, wondering if I had imagined the weight behind them. But I hadn't. And soon I would realize that this was only the beginning. That night, as Daniel slept peacefully beside me, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every moment of that dinner, every word Richard had said, and the way he had looked at me. I wanted to believe I had misunderstood, that it was nothing more than an awkward comment, but deep down I knew better. There was something unsettling about the way he spoke to me, like he was testing the waters, seeing how far he could push without crossing a line, at least not yet. I tried to shake it off in the following days, telling myself I was overreacting. After all, Richard was Daniel's father, a respected man who had always been supportive of our marriage. He wasn't the type of person to do something inappropriate, right? But then the little things started adding up. It began with the texts, random messages from Richard that seemed innocent on the surface but felt off. "Hope you're having a great day," one read. "Thinking about our dinner the other night. Such great conversation." Another time he sent a picture of a new suit he had bought, asking if I thought it looked good on him. Strange, but not enough to cause alarm. Then there were the unannounced visits. Richard had always been involved in Daniel's life, but suddenly he was showing up at our house more often, always when Daniel wasn't home. "Oh, I was just in the neighborhood," he would say, flashing that same practiced smile. I told myself I was imagining things, that I was being paranoid. But when he started complimenting me more frequently, his words growing bolder each time, I could no longer deny what was happening. One afternoon, while Daniel was at work, Richard stopped by with a bottle of wine. "Thought we could share a drink," he said casually, stepping inside before I could protest. My hands tightened around the doorknob as I forced a polite smile. "Daniel won't be home for a while," I said, hoping he would take the hint. "I know," he replied, his gaze lingering on me for just a second too long. Something in my stomach twisted. This wasn't just a father-in-law dropping by. There was an intention behind his actions, a quiet persistence that sent a chill down my spine. I wanted to tell Daniel, to make him see what was happening, but how could I? This was his father, the man he had looked up to his whole life. Would he even believe me? I forced myself to stay composed as Richard settled onto the couch, pouring 2 glasses of wine like he had done this 100 times before. My pulse quickened as he patted the seat beside him, an unspoken invitation I pretended not to notice. Instead, I took the farthest chair, gripping the armrests to steady myself. "So, how have you been?" he asked, his voice smooth, too comfortable. His eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. "Busy," I said shortly, trying to keep the conversation brief. "Daniel and I have been working a lot lately." Richard smiled, swirling the wine in his glass. "That's good. A marriage thrives when both partners stay engaged, but you also need time to enjoy life." The way he said it made my stomach tighten. Every word felt carefully chosen, laced with a meaning I wasn't sure I wanted to unpack. I nodded, focusing on my untouched drink, trying to come up with an excuse to end this visit. Then he leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "You know, I've always admired you. You're such a strong woman. Daniel is lucky." His gaze lingered a second too long. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding in my chest. "Richard, Just then, the sound of the front door unlocking shattered the tension. I exhaled in relief as Daniel walked in, his face lighting up in surprise. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Richard leaned back, his expression shifting instantly to something more casual. "Just catching up with your wife." Daniel smiled, oblivious to the undercurrent of unease in the room. I forced myself to smile too, but inside I knew this wasn't over. Richard wasn't done yet. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself that I had imagined the whole thing, that maybe I had read too much into Richard's words, his lingering glances. But deep down, I knew better. Something had shifted that night, and I could feel it every time he was around. Daniel remained completely unaware, treating his father's visits as nothing more than casual family time. But I noticed the way Richard watched me when he thought no one else was looking. The subtle smirks, the moments he stood too close. It was as if he was testing boundaries, waiting to see how far he could push before I reacted. One evening, Daniel invited his father over for dinner. I did my best to act normal, setting the table and keeping my focus on the meal. But the tension in the air was suffocating. Every time Richard spoke, I felt his eyes on me, his presence looming over the conversation. After dinner, Daniel stepped outside to take a call. The moment he was gone, Richard leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "You seem tense," he murmured, his tone almost amused. I clenched my fists under the table. "I think you should leave," I said firmly, keeping my voice steady. Richard chuckled, shaking his head as if I had made a silly comment. "Come on now, we're just talking." I could hear the door creak as Daniel stepped back inside. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Richard leaned back in his chair, casually picking up his drink, his expression unreadable. I knew then that this wouldn't stop on its own. and I had no idea what he might do next. That night, sleep was impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I could still hear Richard's voice, that smug confidence that made my skin crawl. I kept replaying the moment in my head, wondering if Daniel had noticed anything. But he acted completely normal, talking about work and plans for the weekend, as if nothing had happened. The next morning I decided I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. I needed to tell Daniel. I waited until we were alone, sitting across from him at the kitchen table, my heart pounding. "There's something I need to talk to you about," I started, my voice steady despite the nerves twisting inside me. Daniel looked up from his coffee, concern flickering across his face. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "It's about your father. He's been acting strange, saying things that make me uncomfortable." Daniel frowned. "What kind of things?" Before I could answer, a loud knock at the door made me jump. My stomach sank. I didn't have to guess who it was. Daniel got up, walking over to open it, and just as I expected, Richard stood on the other side, a polite smile on his face, as if he hadn't been the source of my anxiety all night. "I was just in the neighborhood," he said casually, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. His eyes flicked to me, unreadable as always. Daniel sighed. "We were actually in the middle of something, Dad." Richard ignored him, setting a bag of pastries on the counter like he belonged here. "Just wanted to drop these off. Thought you two might like them." I forced a tight smile, my hands clenched under the table. He wasn't just ignoring my boundaries, he was pushing them even further, and Daniel had no idea. But then, something happened that I never saw coming. As Richard turned to leave, he paused at the doorway. He glanced back at me, his expression cool and composed. And then, in a voice just low enough that Daniel couldn't hear, he said, "I know things about your husband, things you don't." My breath caught in my throat. A slow smirk played on his lips before he walked out the door, leaving me frozen in place. What did he mean? What was he trying to tell me? And more importantly, was he telling the truth? I sat there frozen, Richard's words echoing in my mind. "I know things about your husband, things you don't." A chill ran down my spine. What was he trying to say? Was this another manipulative trick, or was there something real behind his words? I had to find out. The moment Daniel returned to the table, I studied his face carefully, searching for any sign of deception. He looked the same, calm, unaware, trusting, but doubt had already started creeping in. "Daniel," I said slowly, my heart pounding, "is there anything you've been keeping from me?" His brows knitted together. "What? Number why?" I hesitated. Should I tell him exactly what his father had said, or would that just give Richard more power over me? I decided to test the waters. "Your dad just said something strange before he left. He acted like he knew something about you that I didn't." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair. "That's just how he is. He loves mind games." He looked at me intently. "You're not actually believing him, are you?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to brush it off as another manipulation, but the seed of doubt had been planted. So later that night, when Daniel fell asleep, I did something I had never done before. I went through his phone. At first, there was nothing unusual, work emails, messages from friends, but then I saw it, an unknown number. The messages were brief, cryptic. "We need to talk. She's starting to ask questions." My breath hitched. Who was she? Was it me? My hands trembled as I scrolled further, my stomach twisting with every message. I couldn't sit in silence anymore. The next morning, I confronted him. "Who is this?" I asked, holding up the phone. Daniel's face paled. "Where did you get that?" "Your phone," I said, my voice tight. "Who's been messaging you? What do they mean by she's starting to ask questions?" For a long moment, he didn't speak. Then he exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "It's my father," he admitted. "He's been trying to stir things up between us. He wants you to doubt me, to think I'm hiding something." I shook my head. "Then what's this message about?" Daniel hesitated. "Because he is hiding something, and he's afraid you're getting too close to the truth." The ground felt like it shifted beneath me. "What truth?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "That he's not the man you think he is." I stared at Daniel, my mind racing. "What do you mean? What is he hiding?" My voice was barely above a whisper. Daniel exhaled deeply, as if he had been carrying the weight of this secret for far too long. "My father has spent years controlling people, manipulating them. You're not the first person he's tried to get inside the head of. He thrives on making people doubt what's real, turning them against the ones they love." I swallowed hard. "But why? Why would he want to come between us?" Daniel hesitated. "Because he doesn't believe in happiness. He sees relationships as power struggles. If he can break us apart, it proves that love is just another illusion, something people use to control each other. He's done it before, to others, even to my mother." My stomach turned. Suddenly, all the small, unsettling moments started making sense. The strange comments, the way Richard would test my reactions, the way he seemed to enjoy the tension he created. He had never been trying to protect me. He had been trying to destroy me, destroy us. I felt a surge of anger, but it wasn't directed at Daniel. It was at Richard, at the way he had planted seeds of doubt in my mind, almost making me believe them. "I won't let him do this to us," I said firmly. "I won't let him win." Daniel reached for my hand, squeezing it gently. "Neither will I." In the following weeks, we made it clear to Richard that his games were over. Daniel confronted him directly, telling him that we saw through his manipulation and that he would no longer have power over our lives. Richard, of course, tried to deny everything, acting as if we had misunderstood. But when he realized we were standing firm, something changed in his eyes. A flicker of something almost like disappointment, as if he had truly believed he could ruin us. After that, he backed off. The calls became less frequent, the visits stopped. It was as if, once he lost control, he lost interest. And though it took time, the weight he had placed on our shoulders began to lift. One evening, as Daniel and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. "It's over," I whispered. Daniel nodded. "Yes, and we're stronger because of it."